Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith, and you're watching another episode of Overbooked, the series where I review every single book on my shelves because it's a great way of assessing whether or not I still like the things I used to read. Did you hear me start to film and decide to pick up a toy? It's a good job you're cute. Today we are going to be talking about The Blood of Stars duology by Elizabeth Lim, the first of which is Spin the Dawn. This is the one that I own, which is why we're talking about it, because it's on my shelves, and that's the premise of the series. I was trying to remember, for the sake of the disclaimers of this video, whether or not I had a review copy of this first book, and I genuinely cannot remember. This is an edition that I pre-ordered, and I remember because I got pre-ordered gifts for it, I think. I definitely had a review copy of the second one, Unravel the Dusk, but I can't remember for this one. Regardless of where books come from, nobody's paying me to talk about books and all opinions are my own. I just like you to know when I've been sent things so that you can make your own judgments. I'm going to keep this as spoiler-free as I can while still talking about some of the elements that I want to talk about. I would say if my normal videos are totally spoiler-free and a spoiler vlog is the other end of the spectrum, we're just an inch away from the end of the spoiler-free line, right? If you do want to go into this knowing absolutely nothing, please do click away now. I will also say that this book does have some content warnings, and the series in fact, for negative attitudes towards women in a very patriarchal society, and also some negative attitudes towards disability. As ever, I will link the story graphs so you can check those out for yourself and make decisions about what you want to read. Spin the Dawn came out in 2019, which feels like a whole other world away. I feel like I am a different woman now, which explains why the woman that I was then decided to buy a YA fantasy hardback, despite already being in this kind of move away from YA fantasy. We make choices. I did the thing. It was followed by the sequel, Unravel the Dusk, in July of 2020. The author, Elizabeth Lim, is an American-based author who has most recently published Six Crimson Cranes, which I have read in the lifetime of this channel. I can't remember if I've talked about it that much here, but I have read it. The sequel to that, The Dragon's Promise, is out later this year. 2022, if you're watching this in the future. I'm going to read you the blurb of book one, because it can explain itself better than I can attempt to. On the fringes of the Great Spice Road, Maya Tamarin works as a seamstress in the shop of her father, once a tailor of renown. She dreams of becoming the greatest tailor in the land, but as a girl, the best she can hope for is to marry well. When a royal messenger summons her ailing father to court, Maya poses as his son and travels to the summer palace in his place. She knows her life is forfeit if her secret is discovered, but she'll take that risk to save her family from ruin and achieve her dream of becoming the imperial tailor. There's just one catch. Maya is one of 12 tailors vying for the job. The competition is cutthroat, and Maya's job is further complicated by the unwelcome attention of the court enchanter Edan, who seems to see straight through her disguise, but nothing could have prepared her for the final challenge, to sew 3 gowns so dangerously beautiful it will take a quest to the ends of the earth to complete them. One of the things that really drew me to this book, even before I was really sewing in any kind of serious capacity, was I was really interested to see how the book would handle a character with a craft-based skill that was not painting. I feel like YA heroines tend to be very good at archery, or possibly stabbing, or just very smart. Not very often do you see them having a very specific skill set, in this case tailoring. I have since read other books that do feature that, we'll come on to that later on, but I wanted to see how this would go. How were her seamstress skills explored within the narrative? For the most part, I think it's done reasonably well. You do get the sense that she's been trained in this. I think, as someone who likes sewing and likes hearing the ins and outs of it, I am probably the wrong audience for a book that just kind of wants to touch on that as, just trust her, she's got great skills, let's tell you about some pretty gowns. Whereas I'm like, I want to know what she knows about sourcing fabric. How is she coping with the, access to things, suddenly having access to fabric that she wouldn't have had access to before. And it sort of wipes a bit of that away with the magic of it all. I don't know that it's bad, but if you want a book about a character who is a seamstress, this is not necessarily that book. It's far more magical and romancy and politicsy, intriguey than that. That being said, if you do want all of those things, there are some fun tropes within this story. I think the story of girl dresses up as male family figure in order to compete in a competition to do X, Y, or Z is always going to be a fun story for me. I like those ideas. I love a contest. I love disguise. I love mistaken identity. I love a romance. All of these things add up to something that is very enjoyable. This is another one of those YA duologies where you have a first book that's got quite a clear setup and then the second book that expands the world and deals with the fallout somewhat. I will confess now, having not done a reread for this video because my schedule would not permit it and I figured I could remember enough of the bits I wanted to talk about that it would be okay. slightly regretting it now, but it is what it is. Past Judith makes these decisions. I don't remember a lot of the sequel, and I don't think, therefore, that the sequel is super essential for this duology, and that's kind of where I'm coming round on YA duologies generally, is that so often the sequel is just not necessary. And it's not that it's a bad book, and it's not that it doesn't have merit or that it doesn't explore interesting ideas. It's just that in this case, book one is fine, and that's all. We could just stop there. We could just tell one story, and I think I'm really coming around to loving standalones in YA particularly. Just I like a story that ends. I like it. Conversely, if you really like a YA sequel that does all those things and expands the world and deals with some of the fallout of the previous book and grows the character in a different way and maybe has a chance to escape the rigidity of the original plot structure, maybe this would be something for you and you'd like to explore that duology. I'm going to take it away from you if you squeak it again. I was trying to remember the kind of discourse around this book when it came out, because obviously it's been coming up for 3 or 4 years now. And I remembered there being a lot of, I want to say, controversy, discussion around the disabled rep in the book and how this is a character who puts on a disability who doesn't really need to. It's not essential for the plot. And I believe that originally in the review copies there was some slightly more questionable, is probably a very kind way of putting it, dealing with that within the plot that got taken out of the final product. I don't have an art copy to compare to, so I don't really know the difference in that. And it's not up to me to decide whether that was enough done. I just wanted to bring it to your attention. I don't think this book is exceptional disability rep. And in some ways it doesn't necessarily need to be. That wasn't what the book was pitting itself as. But then don't try and do it at all. Just leave that bit out of the story, was how I felt reading it, at least. I also think that there are just generally some missed opportunities within this story. This is minorly spoilery, I think. Just a tiny fraction of a spoiler. I felt like the magical element to the sewing just didn't really feel particularly exciting. Like, I want magical sewing. Give it to me. Don't give me an ethical dilemma about whether you should do magical sewing, right? So I was a little bit disappointed in that when I read it, but that didn't take away from my overall enjoyment of the atmosphere and the overarching story and the tropes and the romance and all of the above. I still like this as a book. I just feel like there were missed opportunities. I believe this was Elizabeth Lim's first book, her debut. I can't quite remember, but that feels likely. And I can't see a list of other works at the front, so I'm going to assume that it was and correct myself in the edit if need be. And as a start, I think that's what this feels like. It feels like a start. And having read Six Crimson Cranes in the last 2 years and really enjoyed that, I think that Elizabeth Lim is an author that's just going to grow, and I think we'll see more things from her that are great. I'd really love to see her explore some adult fantasy just because I would like to read that. I think it would be interesting. And I would actually really recommend Six Crimson Cranes if you wanted to explore her work. I would say probably more than Spin the Dawn. Maybe you could go back to Spin the Dawn. I think Six Crimson Cranes just has a bit more of a... I don't know what the word is. I like the character more, I think, is what I came down on. And there's more to the story that makes sense. Whereas elements of this, I'm like, this isn't how humans behave. But lots of YA does feel like this, so it's quite easy to recommend things. I think We Hunt the Flame has similar elements to it that I really enjoyed in terms of two people deceiving each other, but are they really? If you do want a book that explores sewing and character who sews a lot, Tess from M.A. Carrick's Rook and Rose series. I recommend that series all the time. It is very different in terms of tone. Obviously this is YA and Tess is very much a side character, but that is a book that really hit me in the, oh, this is what I want from sewing representation in books. Representation, you know what I mean. Should you read this? Do I recommend this? If you love YA fantasy with all of your heart and soul, as I did when I ordered this 3 or 4 years ago, I would say yes. I think it's an enjoyable time. I think reading it critically and questioning some of the representation of disabled characters is important, but that doesn't take away from the other enjoyment elements of the book and the representation that the book provides in other areas. As I say, I would say start with Six Crimson Cranes and work your way backwards if you feel like it. If you are me and you don't particularly read a lot of YA fantasy anymore and you're kind of starting to phase it slightly out of your bookshelves, except that you agreed to do a project where you would review every book on your shelf and you feel a bit trapped in that, but you don't really want to stop doing it because it's good, provides structure for you, and it means you reread things, I wouldn't necessarily pick this up. There are other YA duologies I would pick up first. Doesn't mean I didn't enjoy this, just it's not something that I think I would buy for myself now. Have you read this? Do you have plans to? Again, we hit the Judith Reading YA review, which I feel like they are all kind of the same. I'm just talking about slightly different duologies. We are going to come up on some YA that I really enjoy when we talk about Reign of the Fallen and There's some other things coming up. Trust me, I am not just an old lady talking about YA who shouldn't be. I don't think I am. I think this is just existential crisis. But if you've read these, do let me know what you like about them in the comments below, or if you didn't like them, that's always interesting as well. While you're down there commenting, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. You can also follow me on social media. Come hang out on Discord, where we have a wonderful time talking about books. Nothing makes me feel more loved and appreciated than my patrons over on Patreon. If you would like to join their number, that's linked below as well. Thanks, guys. That's all from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.